Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This is an odd day, man. I have to give Republicans, or at the very least Rand Paul, credit for what he did today. This is political. In fact, I'm going to let Rand Paul make part of his case, and we can talk about it after. Rand Paul went to the Congress, well of the Congress, and made an impassioned plea, as impassioned as Rand Paul can get, on taking back power for war. Congress is supposed to be the one to declare war. Up to this point, Congress has completely abdicated its responsibility and has allowed the president to go gallivanting around the globe. All of the presidents, Bush, Obama, and Donald Trump. Let's listen to Rand Paul for a moment. We can come back and talk about it.
From Kentucky.
I rise today to oppose unauthorized, undeclared, and unconstitutional war. What we have today is basically unlimited war anywhere, anytime, any place upon the globe. My amendment would sunset in 6 months the 2001 and 2002 use of authorization of force. What does that mean? This was legislation passed many years ago to go after the people who attacked us on 9/11. I supported that battle, but I think the mission is long since over. I don't think that anyone with an ounce of intellectual honesty believes that these authorizations from 16 years ago and 14 years ago, I don't think anyone with intellectual honesty believes that they authorize war in 7 different countries.
And he is absolutely right. He is absolutely, completely correct. The fig leaf that the Obama administration and the Trump administration was using to justify their gallivanting around the globe was the authorization of military force. That was for Iraq. That was for Iraq. These guys are in Syria, Libya. They're in one country after the next. This authorization was for Iraq. Congress has completely abdicated that responsibility, and for the most part has been hands off. We have an imperial presidency. Let the president do his business. This is fascinating that we allow this. Anyone, like Rand Paul said, with an ounce of intellectual honesty will say that a vote to authorize military force in Iraq has nothing to do with those other countries. Now, yes, invading Iraq and killing 1 million people destabilized that region of the world. That's true. But what does destabilizing the Syrian government, meaning paying terrorists or airstrikes in these countries, what does any of that have to do with that authorization act that was passed for Iraq? It was for Iraq. This is a fig leaf. It's a fig leaf in the sense that Congress doesn't want to get involved in this conversation. They don't want to get involved in this debate. And even though they themselves, based on our Constitution, have the power of the purse strings, have the authorization to declare war, up to this point, the president has just done whatever the president has wanted to do, and Congress has turned a blind eye. Finally, Rand Paul comes to the Congress and says, we need to end this. We need to end this. He was going to give them 6 months to make some determination on what they wanted to do, but he's right. You need to sunset this bill. Now, if their goal is to create terrorists, this bill would absolutely create more terrorists. If their goal is to get rid of terrorism, spending $1 trillion to hunt people down in caves is not going to do it. Every mom that you murder, every child that you kill is going to be another terrorist in the wings, waiting to get you. To some degree, even though we may call them terrorists, I would imagine that to some of the people who are involved in this, they're considered freedom fighters. They're considered freedom fighters. They may be a religious extremists and all this other stuff, but ultimately, that's us radicalizing those populations. When the United States was at war, or this kind of proxy war with Russia, Russia went into Afghanistan. United States radicalized some of the elements in Afghanistan, believing that they would fight back against the Soviet push even harder. We can't necessarily evict the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan. We can't get involved in that conflict. The only thing we can do is try to help bleed them of resources, make it as expensive as possible for them to be there. Afghanistan became Russia or Soviet Union's Vietnam. Iraq is our new Vietnam. Attacking 7 other countries around the world, the amount of money that we're spending on military resources, that's our new Vietnam. You have a war on terror. I have no idea what that means. I would imagine that they don't either. Terror is an attack. It's a tactic. It's not a thing to go to war against. Imagine the ridiculousness of the situation where somebody robs a Denny's restaurant and the police department drops a bomb on an entire city. You had somebody or a group pull off a terrorist attack on this country. What does the rest of the country have to do with that terrorist attack? Nothing. Nothing at all. In order to get 1 or 2 people, you literally murdered 1 million people. Those people had nothing to do with what took place on 9/11. You murdered 1 million people. Even in Afghanistan, you're dropping bombs, one weapon after the next. Most of those people had nothing to do with what took place on 9/11. You might have had 99.99% of the people in that particular country innocent. Completely innocent. That Yahoo goes into a country and starts blowing the shit out that country. First country invaded, Afghanistan. At the very least, you could say there's some tangential relation to what's going on. But I'm making this point to you that something that 1 or 2 or a small group of people did in no way justifies destroying an entire country. That's the point I'm getting at. These guys have been declaring war and jumping from country to country to country, and the rest of the world has been mum. They haven't said squat about it. I don't understand anybody else who would be allowed to do this. When Saddam Hussein decided to go into Kuwait, the United States thought it was necessary to evict him from Kuwait. Why did the United States think it was necessary to evict him from Kuwait? Because he didn't belong there. That wasn't his country. The United States is doing that 7 times over in one country after the next. Do you realize we have special forces in 60% of the countries on this globe? We have military bases, like 1,000 military bases, in nearly every country on this planet. This is amazing to me. This is amazing to me. Our debt has hit $20 trillion with a T. And you have to ask the question, what do we have to show for $20 trillion? You have squat. You have squat. You don't have universal health care. You still have millions of people uninsured. The transportation system is immensely shitty. The United States is on class to be a second-tier nation. Not because we didn't have the money. Not because we didn't have the technical know-how. The resources that should have been spent on the people of this country were squandered and wasted on weapons and bombs and missiles and jets and planes and all these other things. We spend more than 8 other nations combined. Many of those nations are our friends. Imagine the ridiculousness of this. You have the military as a jobs program. That jobs programs create weapons to murder other people in other countries. In murdering those other people in other countries, you create even more terrorists, which allowed you to keep making bombs and missiles and jets and planes. You have a jobs program. You're putting a massive amount of money into all of these different industries. Not because we need it. Not because we need it. Purely from the standpoint of you're greasing people's pockets. If your goal was to create terrorists, then good job. You've done a great job. If your goal was to somehow stem terrorism by murdering a lot of people, you failed miserably. You failed miserably. The entire last presidency was a failure. The presidency before him was a failure. The United States fails in one military conflict after the next. The reason it fails is because it tries to go for objectives that are unnecessary and unwinnable. There is no such thing with winning a war against terror by dropping bombs and causing more terror. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Rand Paul gets a lot of credit for this. The Democrats that helped the other Republicans vote this bill down deserves your scorn. They deserve your utter scorn. Because yes, you had, if I'm not mistaken, 13 Democrats that toppled this legislation in addition to the Republicans. Let me go through this. Slight tangent. I don't like people being murdered. I damn sure don't like people being murdered for sketchy reasons. What people call common sense is fucking insanity. Do you understand that we are dropping bombs on other people, meaning we're murdering people all across the globe, and we're stunned and shocked when some of those people are mad that we're murdering them? I find this to be fascinating. We're talking about Kim Jong-un, the guy in North Korea, because he exploded a nuclear weapon. We're expanding our nuclear arsenal by what, $1 trillion? Nobody says squat. South Korea and the United States' military exercises, this straight and clear provocation against the North. Nobody says squat. We've attacked a country and killed 1 million people. Nobody said squat. Nobody went to prison. Nobody did anything. While we're in that country, we decided it was perfectly okay to torture innocent people. The reason I said they were innocent people, because there were no terrorists in Iraq before the United States got there. Our track record is creating terrorists. Let me go through this real quick. Senate scuttles Rand Paul's war powers repeal. The Senate Wednesday scuttled a proposal by Rand Paul to repeal the war authorization that underpins the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as military action in a slew of other countries. The vote was 61-36 to table or kill Paul's amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. The Kentucky Republicans' proposal would have repealed both the 2001 and 2002 authorizations for the military, for the use of military force 6 months after the bill becomes law, giving lawmakers a tight window to pass a new framework for U.S. military overseas. I would say the first question is should the United States military be overseas? That would be the first question. The second point, the National Defense Authorization Act allowed the President of the United States to put U.S. troops on our soil. Not to mention this idea of ferreting Americans away into black sites. That was Obama. Before some Democrat tells me how awesome Obama was for civil liberties and how Donald Trump is taking their rights, what the fuck is this? What is this? That was passed on his watch. National Defense Authorization Act. It took a Republican to stand up against it. It's amazing. The First Amendment vote on the Defense Policy Bill, H.R. 2810, saw Republicans and Democrats join to defeat Paul's proposal, while most Democrats and a handful of Republicans joined to support the repeal. In a floor vote speech Tuesday, Paul torched his fellow lawmakers for refusing to vote to authorize the myriad of military actions the United States has engaged in since the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Look, Rand Paul is right on this. He's absolutely right on this. We've come to an odd place where Democrats literally have become the war party in conjunction with the Republican Party. That's not amazing for the Republicans to vote this down. Republicans are a part of war. They enjoy it. They're less empathetic. They don't really give a shit about murdering people, so they are perfectly okay with this. Democrats aren't supposed to be. They're not supposed to be. Now, Bernie Sanders voted against it, but Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. And you did have right many Democrats that actually voted in order to repeal the AUMF. But you still had a slew that chose not to. Understand how cowardly this is, and I'll end it on this. Congress has a responsibility. That responsibility has to do with declarations of war. That's Congress's job. Congress has completely abdicated its responsibility to the President of the United States. They should have been as stingy could be in regards to retaining their power on this front. And they completely just gave it away. This Republican, Rand Paul, gets on the floor and says, we have a constitutional duty to declare war. Or in this case, to restrain the office of the president. And they said, no. We're perfectly okay with Donald Trump being able to bomb and kill and maim in one country after the next. We want nothing to do with it. That's an amazing thing, man. That's amazing. He says, anyone with a shred of intellectual honesty. Who says they have intellectual honesty? He's in Congress. Certainly he knows they don't have intellectual honesty. There's nobody in their right mind that can make an honest case that bombing 7 other nations had anything to do with Iraq. Not at all. There's no way. There's no way. If Congress wanted to pass a law that would allow the president to go in one country after the next and murder civilians, then they should have passed that law. Not allow the president to do it willy-nilly and was on his own without any oversight at all. You have a singular person, one guy, is making a determination to go into whatever country that guy wants to go into and murder in any way that person wants to. And the U.S. government is essentially hands off, turns a blind eye, and pretends as if it doesn't exist. Both parties. When you hear somebody like Ben Jealous or I think Eric Dyson did this too. These guys are supposed to be lefties and they're out there arguing why Obama was justified in murdering civilians. This is where you are in regards to the Democratic Party. This is where you are with the party. This is where the party is. Both of these parties agree on matters of war. They may quibble over the degree, but they agree mostly on matters of war. This past, Congress has given up all of its constitutional authority to essentially hold the president accountable for declarations of war. You would have to believe, to make this legal, you would have to full well to believe that all of those countries that the United States have been in and dropping bombs and murdering civilians, that those countries are in any way an actual threat to this country. They are not. They are not. We are the terrorists. Just understand that. Based on our own definition, we are the terrorists. So, Rand Paul, good job. The other people who undercut him in order to kill this bill, do your job. Do your job. You have a constitutional authority. Do it. Fulfill it. You damn sure aren't doing it on this one. Good job, Rand Paul.